Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and sorry about the dark video there today, but the gold's in the word. So today I'm going to be talking about Solnar Swift Dark, and specifically I'm going to be talking about dice mechanics. So the difficulty checks of the game, you know, this is a really key rule mechanic, and I really want to get it right, and so I just kind of been flipping ideas in my head. And I think I've come up with where I wanted to land with this. So I've already explained the polyhedral sets. The polyhedral sets for Solnar Swift Dark come in red, blue, green, white, black, and red, white, black, red, blue, green. So 5 sets, and then a unique set, right? Which the GM can bring, and as long as it's not one of those other colors and it's distinct, it's great. So you got 6 different dice sets in there. So basically there's this pool in the middle, and people are pulling dice from the pool. So what I've landed on is one, I think I really have always loved the dice explosion on the top, right? But one of the things about Solnar Swift Dark is my goal is to really blow every tabletop role-playing game that has been made out of the water. And now that's a big goal, and I'm not trying to be hubristic. The reason why I think this is possible is, I've read probably 200 or 300 role-playing games, and so the core rule books, and I have a love for cool rule books. So I think a lot of other tabletop role-playing game designers out there have read deep into a lot of tabletop role-playing games. I've read the core rule book of way more tabletop role-playing games than most people I've met, right? And that has allowed me to see how like 300 different designers have approached tabletop role-playing games. And to me, the guys who are the best are Luke Crane, Monty Cook, Robin Laws. There's a few other guys in there, but these guys are really top of the stack, right? And Mike Merles, definitely don't want to leave him out. Absolutely fantastic. And those are the guys who are live today. That's what I'm talking about. Of course, Gary Gygax's in that list. And actually, I'm going to throw this one out. Nigel Finley. If you've never read any of his work, look it up. He's a brilliant designer. Really important in the tabletop role-playing game industry. He's no longer with us. So I did just want to talk a little bit about... Okay, so where am I heading with this dice mechanic, right? The place where I'm heading with this dice mechanic is oh, excuse me. Sorry. The place where I'm heading with this dice mechanic is specifically I want to determine okay. So there are going to be 3 kind of knobs, 3 dials that you can turn with dice, right? And all 3 of these dials will be triggered by boosts, okay? And boosts are things that give you an advantage, things that give you an edge, right? And so those dials are, okay, so you have, basically, when a player goes to make a roll, they have nothing, right? Now, their race might give them a specific die, their class might give them a specific die, but they start with nothing, and then they have to, kind of build up what they're going to build with, right? So so that's important, right? And from there, okay, so here's the dials, right? Let's say a human fighter is going to attack a goblin with his sword. So he's a human, that might give him a D4, right? And he is a fighter, that might give him a D6, okay, for that action. So at that point, he can pull those dice, but one of the things he cannot do is he can't actually pull a die that matches the color of the attribute he's rolling. That's a privilege, and you don't get it unless it gives you something that would allow that, right? I'm sorry, I need to back it up even further. So let's say it's a human fighter, okay? Human gives him a D4, okay? Fighter does not give him, and I appreciate your patience, I'm still kind of working through this in my mind. Fighter does not give him an extra die, What fighter does is, this is a combat action. So one of the features of a combat of a fighter is when you're taking a combat action, you get to match color, right? So you can choose a die that matches the color of the attribute you're rolling for. So at this point, he's rolling for might, right? And he's rolling for vigor, right? So he's rolling for vigor, and he goes to get a green die, and so right now he has a D4 green die. If there's no other circumstances, then he's going to get to roll that D4 green die. All right. Now let's say that the difficulty for hitting this goblin is a 6. Well, he can't hit a 6, right? Because he only has a D4. But because he's matched color, because he's rolling a vigor die, a green die for a vigor attribute, it will explode. But because everything's better in Solnar Swift Arc, right? It doesn't just explode on the high, it explodes on the high and the low. So the die explodes. You get, so if you roll a 3, you end with a stat of 3. If you roll with a 4 and if you roll a 4 and then a 4, it explodes. You keep the 4, and then let's say you roll a 2, you would have a 6 for your difficulty check, right? And you would achieve it, right? Now let's say that he rolls a 4, a 1, and a 3, right? That would be a total of 9. Right? Now he has succeeded in hitting the goblin, right? And he has an overage of 3, right? He has a success margin of 3, right? Now, that's just at the simplest. Let's say he has boosts, right? So let's say that the goblin is prone, right? No. Let's keep it simpler than that. Let's say that human fighter, he's got a vigor die, and he has a boost, and that boost is that he has a reputation among these goblins, and that reputation causes the goblins to know him and fear him. His sigil is known among the goblins specifically. Like, because his father, routed their warren 20 years ago, and they still tell tales of it, and there's drawings of that sigil in their warren, right? That's a significant, that's a boost, right? Now, what can he do with that boost? So he has 3 options with a boost, and I'm thinking about making it with a boost. You always have the same 3 options. You could do a color match, right? Now, he doesn't want to do a color match because he already has a color match, right? You can do an additional die. So you can grab another die out of the pool. You can't grab a color match for that die. That's always a privilege. You need to earn it. You have to have a boost to get it, right? So he can do a color match flat, right? But he already has it, so he doesn't want to do that. He can do he can grab an additional die, right? He takes an additional die. And then the last part is he can do a step, right? So he can increase his die. He can grow his die, right? So he can grow the current die from a D4 to a D6. So he has different options, right? One option is kind of a dead option. The color match, he already has it, doesn't need it. So he's just going to bypass it, right? The second option is a step. So he will change his current green D4 to a green D6, right? When you do a step, you always get to keep your color match if you already have it, right? Then the other thing he could do is keep the D4, but get a black D4. So now he has a color matched vigor D4 that will explode on 1s and 4s. He has a black 1d4 that will roll and give him up to 4 more points, but it won't explode on 1 or 4 because a black die would line up with a different attribute, okay? So he has a lot of options, right? And there's all kinds of things that can happen in addition to that. Another boost is, let's say that the thief in his party, she has leadership. And she cries out, she says, hey, that goblin is on asphalt, is on shifting ground. right, and calls out, a piece of information, aiding him in his attack. He now has 2 boosts, right? So he could get an additional die, and he could color match that die. So now he has 2 green D4s, or 2 green D4s, 2 vigor D4s, right? Or he could go, I got my vigor green D4, and I'm going to get another D4, and I'm going to step up my green D4 to a D6. So as you can see, with these boosts, you can just go crazy with it. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, and there's a lot of options. And when players start to build that die pool, I think because we're allowing steps, the die pools don't get crazy. I'm a huge fan of Shadowrun, but not for Shadowrun's rules. And it was fun when I was, in my 20s in college, and rolling dice pools of 18 die, but that gets old. Like, the dice scatter all over the table. It's cool for a little while, but it was never a great mechanic, rolling 18 dice. So I definitely want to see if I can keep the dice pool down, and steps will allow us to keep those dice pool down. And that should help, right? So that's a good thing. So that's where I'm heading with these dice pools. I'm really excited about it. Oh, and I also want to talk about success margin. So success margin. One of the things that happens in a lot of tabletop role-playing games is you need a 12 to succeed, and you get an 18, and then so that's a success margin of 6. Many games do nothing with that 6, right? So to me, there's going to be 2 things that are so for success margin, right? You're going to have all kinds of options with success margin. You can turn it into damage at a conversion rate. Here's another thing. You can give it to any other player as XP, right? That's a big one, right? In fact, I am thinking about making that the only way in the game that you actually earn XP, with the Game Master being able to slap a multiplier on it. So, you want the Game Master to be able to give XP. I think, right? I am having a hard time saying which of the tabletop role-playing game traditions do I honor and which do I abandon, right? And so I'm still thinking this one through, but I definitely know that when you get an overage, you're going to be able to do all kinds of awesome things with that. You're going to be able to convert it into damage. You might be able to put a condition onto the person that you just hit. You might be able to do it with flourish, so that it might cause a morale break for the creatures that you're fighting, so that they run away, right? Oh, that's another thing. Absolutely, I'm going to have all kinds of mechanics for breaks where henchmen and minions run away. Villains will almost never run away because they're villains, they're top dogs, right? But henchmen and minions, they frequently will run away, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. It speeds combat, and anything that speeds combat, I'm going to put that into the game because I want to tell these stories faster. Number one goal of Solnar Swift Arc, right? So, really, really important. Just, kind of thinking that through, having that in there. I really like the idea of having that in there. And the margin thing is a big deal for me. So I really like this idea of doing a lot with success margins, giving it away to a player for XP. Game Master can do a 2 or 3 time shot on there, especially if that's success. And here's one of the things. One of the things I want to do, I want to give crazy rule mechanic benefits to players to agree and coordinate, right? So if players are agreeing together, which keeps the party together in a natural, holistic way that serves the story, the Game Master can, they can say, you know what, I'm going to double all the success margin XP given for this next encounter because you guys planned really well and everybody, agreed on the plan and no one did a Leroy Jenkins, right? So that's another thing. So I'm thinking about, Game Masters will just multiply the existing XP that's being given from success overages. And then the other thing is the success overages are a currency, so you could turn them into damage, you could turn them into XP for another player, never for yourself. And then I really like that, and I definitely am going to keep that. As far as I'm not going to be, if you have a crazy huge success overage and you're swamping your XP, your target numbers, that should be logically the people you're not going to learn more by crushing stuff, but the people around you are going to learn from that, from seeing it and seeing how well it's done. And I really want also these war bands, these teams, these crews to really benefit from being together, right? And I want cohesiveness and friendship and camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood to be rules mechanic rewarded within the game, right? So all those type of things are in there, and then also maybe even certain success overages. The list can go on and on and on what it could do. One of the things is maybe it can unlock additional actions for other players, right? I really like this idea of you just got a huge success, you were awesome, but that benefits your other players. Maybe even attacks of opportunity that are happening from successes of some success margins, but they're going to be advantaged by other players, right? So that's where I'm heading. I feel like a little bit of a breakthrough. I was really kind of struggling, how do I get this rolling? How do I get this going? And it was a little challenging, but I think I'm heading in the right direction. I want to thank everybody who continues to comment on my videos. Exceptionally useful. And really helpful, and I really appreciate all your feedback. And I could definitely use your thoughts and prayers as I continue with Solnar Swift Arc. And just kind of, I really want to get it right. I want to honor the designers that went before me, and I also definitely just want to say I want to do everything I can to stand on people's shoulders and give credit to those people whose shoulders I'm standing on. And I'm very excited about this, and I'm excited that you guys are in the mix with me. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.